What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, something is happening in the depths of space that could fundamentally change everything we believe about our place in the universe? What if humanity has just encountered something that shouldn't exist according to every scientific principle we know? Well, that's exactly what's unfolding right now, and honestly, it's keeping scientists up at night. Let me set the stage for you. Out there, beyond our solar system's comfortable boundaries, there's an object that's caught the attention of the entire international scientific community. It's called 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object ever recorded to pass through our cosmic neighborhood. And unlike the first two that were interesting but relatively straightforward, this one is different. This one is breaking all the rules. 3 years ago, nobody had even heard of interstellar objects. Then we discovered Oumuamua, this weird stick-shaped thing flying through space. Then came Comet Borisov. Scientists catalogued them, studied them, understood them through the lens of conventional astronomy. But 3I Atlas? This is the object that's making professors question their entire career's worth of knowledge. Here's where the story really gets interesting. The object reached something called perihelion. That's the point where it got closest to the sun. And when it did, it received solar radiation levels of up to 770 watts per square meter. Now, I know those numbers sound abstract, but imagine this. That's intense heat. That's the kind of temperature that should be cooking this object from the outside in, fundamentally changing its physical composition. The sun's energy should be tearing it apart, vaporizing its surface, making it explode outward in all directions like a typical comet does. But here's the thing. 3I Atlas didn't cooperate with expectations. Instead of behaving like every other comet humanity has ever observed, this object started doing something completely unprecedented. It began accelerating. Not just a little bit, a significant, measurable acceleration that shouldn't happen according to the laws of physics that govern these objects. Scientists looked at this, checked their calculations twice, then checked them again because they thought there must be an error. But there wasn't. The acceleration pattern was unusual, inconsistent with what we'd call natural orbital mechanics. Something was pushing this object. Something was giving it a boost that shouldn't exist in the natural universe without an external force. Then came the spectroscopic observations. When scientists analyzed the light coming from 3I Atlas, they discovered something that made them sit back in their chairs. The object was glowing blue. Not the typical yellowish-white glow of a normal comet with its ice and dust catching sunlight. A blue glow. A glow that suggested something unique about its material composition. Or possibly a reflection mechanism that we've never seen before. This is where the scientific community started splitting into camps. On one side, you had the traditionalists, saying this must be some kind of rare natural phenomenon, an unusual remnant from deep space with properties we simply hadn't encountered. On the other side, bolder voices were starting to whisper something that would have been laughed out of the room just a few years ago. What if this isn't natural at all? What if this is something artificial? Now, let me be clear about something. These aren't fringe scientists or conspiracy theorists. These are serious researchers with decades of experience, publishing in peer-reviewed journals, working at major institutions. And they were starting to consider that 3I Atlas might not be a rock flying through space. It might be a probe. An actual piece of technology from somewhere beyond Earth. The real mystery deepens when you start looking at the energy requirements. Here's where the math gets wild. Scientists calculated that if 3I Atlas were just a natural object trying to create this kind of acceleration through natural evaporation, it would have had to lose about 15% of its mass. Think about that for a second. 15%. That's enormous. That's not just surface evaporation. That's catastrophic mass loss. For a natural comet or asteroid to lose that much of itself just to generate thrust, it would require an unprecedented period of intense evaporation. We are talking about the object not only losing its outer shell, the dust and ice coating, but also parts of its internal structure. This would be one of the most violent processes ever recorded in astronomical observations. But here's the confounding part. There was no evidence of this happening in the weeks leading up to perihelion. No gradual increase in activity. It was like something switched on suddenly. This opens up a possibility that's almost too strange to consider. If 3I Atlas underwent such intense evaporation, it would give humanity an unprecedented opportunity. We could actually see what's inside an object from outside the solar system. We could analyze the true composition of something that originated beyond our sun's influence. That's huge. That's the kind of discovery that rewrites textbooks.
But then the jets appeared, and things became truly bizarre.
After the object passed perihelion, after it got blasted by the sun's intense radiation, images captured something that left the scientific community absolutely stunned. 7, count them 7, distinctly directional jets were emanating from 3I Atlas. Not random venting of gases, not the typical outgassing you'd expect from a warming comet. These were organized directional jets, shooting out in various directions, including some pointing directly toward the sun. The scale of these jets was almost incomprehensible. The ones pointing toward the sun stretched about 1 million kilometers. The ones pointing away from the sun, the anti-solar jets, extended 3 million kilometers into space. To put that in perspective, that's multiple times the distance from Earth to the sun. It's a cosmic engineering project of staggering proportions, and it appeared suddenly. Within days, 3I Atlas had created what can only be described as a massive structure in space. Now, here's where my skin started crawling when I read this. These jets aren't simple optical phenomena. They are not just light reflecting off ice crystals. According to plasma dynamics models, and this is where physicists really started getting nervous, these jets represent energy and density levels that far exceed the limits of what we understand from natural physics. Think about what it takes to overcome solar wind. The sun's wind is basically a stream of particles carrying momentum at incredible speeds, something like 400 kilometers per second in some estimates. It's this massive pressure pushing outward from the sun. For a jet of gas or plasma to overcome that pressure and maintain its shape over distances of 1 million kilometers, the jet would have to be incomprehensibly dense. We're talking about 1 million times denser than normal matter that evaporates from comets. That's not a number that makes sense in natural physics. That's a number that makes physicists look at each other across conference tables with that expression of, "this shouldn't be possible." Some researchers tried to explain it anyway. They proposed that maybe, just maybe, this was carbon dioxide ice sublimating, essentially the most volatile substance that could vaporize from a comet. CO2 ice evaporates easily, but even if you assume maximum efficiency with carbon dioxide vaporization, the surface area required to absorb enough sunlight to generate these jets would need to be an object at least 20 kilometers in diameter. The Hubble Space Telescope has never recorded 3I Atlas as being anywhere near that large. So maybe it fragmented. Maybe 3I Atlas broke into many pieces, and it's these fragments together that provide the enormous surface area needed to generate what we're seeing. If that's the case, then the sun's gravity would start pulling these fragments apart as 3I Atlas moved away from its closest point. We'd see them separating gradually, creating a trail of debris that would reveal the true nature of what we're dealing with. But here's the weird part. The object kept its shape. Amateur telescopes continued showing a steady, bright central point, no obvious large-scale fragmentation, no trail of debris spreading out like you'd expect from a disintegrating comet. It was holding itself together while simultaneously ejecting matter at speeds and densities that shouldn't be possible. This is when Professor Avilov made a comment that became legendary in the scientific community. He said, and I quote, "We only have 6 days left until Christmas, and hopefully 3I Atlas will not bring an unwanted gift to humanity." It was delivered half joking, half serious, but those words sent chills through the scientific community because everyone understood what he was really saying. Nobody knew what this object was capable of. The total mass estimates for these jets are staggering. According to preliminary calculations, the entire amount of matter being ejected could total around 5 billion tons. 5 billion tons of material shooting through space in organized jets. If this is a natural phenomenon, 3I Atlas would be one of the strangest objects ever discovered in the history of astronomy. Absolutely unprecedented. But if it's not natural, if this is indeed some kind of artificial propulsion system, then humanity might be witnessing something that belongs in science fiction novels, not in peer-reviewed astronomical journals. Let me walk you through the technology hypothesis because it's where things get really fascinating. What if this isn't a comet at all? What if this is a spacecraft using some kind of propulsion technology? Think about ion engines. These are real technologies that humanity has already developed. They work by accelerating ions to extremely high speeds to create thrust. Ion engines are incredibly efficient, but produce small amounts of thrust. They are perfect for spacecraft because they use very little fuel to achieve their goals. Some researchers started asking, what if 3I Atlas is using something similar? What if it's using an advanced version of ion propulsion, or jet engines, or even some kind of propulsion system so advanced that we don't even have names for it yet? A system from a civilization that's hundreds or thousands of years ahead of us technologically. The beauty of this hypothesis is that it actually explains the data better than the natural comet model does. Think about it logically. If 3I Atlas is powered by an ion engine or similar technology, the exhaust velocity could be hundreds of times higher than natural evaporation. That means you wouldn't need to lose 15% of your mass to create acceleration. You could achieve the same results while losing only a tiny fraction of your mass. It's elegant, it's efficient, it's the kind of technology an advanced civilization would use for interstellar travel. And then there's the directionality of those jets. This is something that really bothers conventional astronomers because it breaks their model so thoroughly. Natural comets typically produce jets that point away from the sun. That's just physics. The sun hits one side, that side vaporizes, you get an outflow. It's directional, but it's always away from the heat source. It's simple, it's predictable, it's natural. But 3I Atlas has jets pointing towards the sun. Toward it. Directly into the solar wind. Directly into the heat. That's not natural behavior. That's controlled behavior. That's the kind of thing you'd do if you had systems designed to handle extreme conditions and navigate through the solar system with purpose. The images showing the sheer scale of these jets were shocking. We are not talking about wispy trails that fade out. These jets stretched millions of kilometers with distinct structure, with observable density gradients, with what looked like intentional geometry. The sunward jets around 1 million kilometers, the anti-solar jets at 3 million kilometers. Perfectly formed. Maintained across distances that should have torn them apart if they were natural phenomena. Now, the scientific community being what it is, there were immediate skeptical responses. Some researchers ran the numbers and said, okay, even if we assume this is natural evaporation at maximum efficiency, how long would it take to create a gas tail 3 million kilometers long? According to comet dynamics models, with a natural evaporation speed of about 400 meters per second, this would take at least 3 months of continuous activity. But here's the smoking gun. 3 months ago, no telescope recorded any similar activity from this object. The phenomenon appeared suddenly. Within a few short weeks after perihelion, this massive structure was fully formed. That's not natural. Natural processes don't work that way. Natural evaporation builds gradually. This appeared like someone flipped a switch. The escape velocities required for these jets are mind-bending. Scientists calculated that to create such a long jet of gas in such a short time frame, the escape velocity would have to reach over 1 kilometer per second, possibly up to 2 kilometers per second. Those are rocket engine speeds. Those are artificial propulsion speeds. Ice molecules and dust particles in a natural comet can't reach those velocities. Even with extreme heating, even at the absolute theoretical maximum of what thermodynamics allows, natural materials simply can't achieve those speeds. We're in a situation where the data presents a clear choice. Either 3I Atlas is following a completely new physical mechanism that we don't understand, or it's not a natural object. There is no middle ground. There is no explanation that fits both the observations and conventional physics. This is where the scientific community hit a wall of uncertainty. Because yes, the alternative explanation, that this is artificial, that's a huge claim. That requires extraordinary evidence. But the evidence is there. It's in the images. It's in the spectroscopic data. It's in the acceleration patterns. It's in the jet formations. Meanwhile, other mysteries were stacking up. The object's orbit shifted slightly, about 10 Earth diameters worth of drift in a month. That's tiny compared to the Earth-Sun distance, but it's measurable, it's observable, and it suggests something more than just passive coasting through space. Something's correcting course. Something's adjusting trajectory. There's no evidence that 3I Atlas is approaching Earth. Let me be clear about that right now. Nobody is saying we're about to have an impact event. The researchers have ruled out any collision risk in the near future. But some scientists started entertaining an even more daring hypothesis. What if this isn't a single object with unusual properties? What if it's a mothership? What if 3I Atlas is a larger vessel that's launching smaller devices in multiple directions, including possibly toward Earth? It's wild speculation, I know, but it's speculation that serious astronomers are openly discussing, because the conventional explanations have run out of credibility. When you've eliminated all the natural answers, whatever remains, however improbable, deserves consideration. And then something happened that made the mystery even deeper. On November 2nd, another object was discovered. This one by Gennady Borisov, the same astronomer who discovered the interstellar comet that bears his name back in 2019. This new object has an orbit incline of 110 degrees. That means it's traveling almost perpendicular to 3I Atlas's orbit. The two objects won't come closer than about 500 to 100 million kilometers from each other, so there's no direct interaction. But the timing is what's causing scientific eyebrows to raise. This new object was discovered right when 3I Atlas was reaching perihelion, right at the moment of maximum activity. Coincidence? Maybe. But in astronomy, when coincidences line up perfectly with major events, scientists get nervous. They start asking if there's a connection that hasn't been revealed yet. The release of high-resolution images that could have answered so many questions hit a bureaucratic roadblock. The data was ready. The images were captured. But then the US government shutdown happened, and suddenly there were delays in NASA's approval process. Now, normally, routine scientific data doesn't require special government approval. But these images of 3I Atlas apparently fell into a different category. Questions started being asked about why information was being held back. Why wasn't the scientific community immediately seeing everything? Professor Avilob publicly criticized the situation, and his words were pretty harsh. He accused bureaucracy of holding back science. He said that every delay is a lost intellectual opportunity. He also criticized conservative scientists who, in his view, were too quick to label every strange object as a comet just to maintain their comfortable worldview. He compared them to AIs that only know how to repeat old data, always forcing new observations into old templates, regardless of whether the template actually fits. His argument was that if an object had no tail and no gravitational acceleration, they'd still call it a dark comet to avoid the cognitive discomfort of the unknown. He pointed out that this was already done with another object. They called it a dark comet when the data didn't fit. Loeb was saying that the problem isn't the data. The data is clear. The problem is the mindset. When you force an object like 3I Atlas into the old model, when you insist it's just a comet with unusual properties, you risk humanity missing out on something that could change everything. The delay in releasing images fueled suspicion that something was being hidden. Why else would NASA suddenly bureaucratize the release of routine astronomical data? What were they afraid of? What would public knowledge of these images mean for how governments and institutions had to respond? Despite all this, the images that amateur astronomers could capture through their telescopes showed something fascinating. 3i Atlas was maintaining its shape. It was moving steadily through space. It wasn't fragmenting despite all those powerful jets of outgassing. That structural integrity, that maintained cohesion despite the violent activity, that itself was a mystery. If this were a natural comet being torn apart by evaporation, it should have been falling to pieces by now. The fact that it remained solid, that it kept its shape, that it held together while simultaneously producing these massive jets, that's not natural behavior. Many experts who looked at the situation commented that if nothing unusual had happened, if this were just a routine comet, NASA would have released the images immediately. The delay itself became evidence. The silence became proof that something was strange, something was worthy of concern, something was being handled differently than normal astronomical observations. The available spectroscopic data that was released showed the presence of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and water vapor. These are common molecules in the universe. They are detected in many comets. They are not unusual in themselves. But here's what makes them interesting in the context of 3i Atlas. If this object is artificial, these common compounds could simply be a chemical coating that accumulated on the outer surface during its journey through interstellar space. Just a layer of dust, ice, and gas that built up on the crust over eons of travel. Then, as it approached the sun, as it received intense radiation, that coating vaporized, revealing what was underneath. On the other hand, if the object maintains its structure while emitting these massive multidirectional jets, that's a sign pointing toward artificial propulsion technology. Because the jets pointing toward the sun, directly into the solar wind, that's not something natural can explain. Natural forces would push the jets away from the heat, away from the pressure. Artificial systems, on the other hand, could be designed to operate in any direction, to fight against natural forces, to navigate through harsh conditions with precision. As 3i Atlas continued its journey away from the sun and into observation positions that were more favorable, all eyes turned toward what the sophisticated space observatories would reveal. The Large Space Telescope, high-res imaging equipment with unprecedented resolution and clarity, was getting ready to capture images at a tilted viewing angle. That angle was crucial because it would finally allow astronomers to see the three-dimensional structure of the jets. They could measure asymmetries, they could determine speeds with precision. They could capture brightness profiles and directions of spread. They could finally answer questions that ground-based telescopes couldn't address. The theoretical calculations were being updated constantly. New models were being built, new hypotheses were being tested, scientists were preparing for what might be the most important astronomical announcement in human history. Or, alternately, they were preparing to explain away the most significant anomaly in decades as just an unusual comet. Think about what happens in the coming weeks. If 3i Atlas fragments, if it breaks apart under tidal forces from the sun, then the debris will separate gradually. Each fragment will experience different gravitational pulls. The picture will become clear. It was disintegrating. The mystery will have a natural explanation, and we can all sleep a little easier knowing the universe follows the rules we understand. But what if it doesn't fragment? What if it maintains its integrity? What if the high-resolution images show something that can't be explained by conventional comet dynamics? What if the jets show signs of directed control, of artificial engineering, of technology that predates our civilization by millennia or longer? Then humanity faces a question it's never had to answer before. We are not alone, and whatever's out there, it's already passing through our cosmic neighborhood. The implications of that are staggering. It changes philosophy, religion, politics, science, our understanding of our place in the universe. Everything shifts if that answer comes back as yes, this is artificial. The countdown began then. A few weeks to gather data, a few weeks to measure velocities precisely, to analyze mass and chemical composition, to study the jets in detail. A few weeks to finally demarcate the boundary between natural and artificial. A few weeks to answer the question that has haunted humanity since we first looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was looking back. For Loeb and other scientists who believe there was something unprecedented happening, this was the pure essence of science. observing rather than assuming, learning rather than guessing, gathering data, testing hypotheses, following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads somewhere that challenges everything we thought we knew. He criticized those who wanted to suppress public curiosity, who wanted to keep the mystery contained within institutional walls. Science, he argued, shouldn't hide the truth for fear of causing panic. The truth was being discovered, the observations were being made, the data was being gathered. Humanity deserved to know what was actually happening in space. And as the scientific community continued monitoring 3I Atlas's velocity and trajectory, as they prepared their instruments and checked their calibrations, the world waited. Some waited with hope that finally humanity would encounter something that proved the existence of intelligence beyond Earth. Others waited with fear of the unknown, and others waited with skepticism, certain that there would be a natural explanation, that science would ultimately reveal another chapter in our understanding of comets and interstellar objects. The truth was close. The answers were almost in reach. In just a few weeks, with enough spectral data and high-resolution images, the nature of 3I Atlas would be revealed. One way or another, humanity was about to learn something profound. Whether it was a decaying comet following unprecedented physical mechanisms, or whether it was a technological construct moving with purpose through the cosmos, the moment of revelation was approaching. In the coming days, the monitors continued their watch. The instruments were positioned. The questions hung in the air like static electricity before a lightning strike. And somewhere in the depths of space, 3I Atlas continued its journey, carrying with it the biggest question of our time. Is humanity ready for the answer?